Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. When you spend all of your awake time in total darkness, it does something to your mind. People need to see the sun. We're not meant to be awake at night, and when the darkness turns on you and starts eating away at your sanity, or when you get too comfortable down there, that's when the horse creeps up on you. It wasn't meant to be a long-term job. I just got tired of school and wanted to work for a year and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. How a family member helped you get the job. That's how things usually go when it comes to making tunnels waterproof. Both physically and mentally, it was very hard work. But it was also very well paid. I had done portal jobs for a few months before I was sent to the Subsea tunnel. That's what we called tunnel entrances. The portals were easy to use, but they were often very hard on your body. Since we had to hold the gear on top of them most of the time, like drills, rolls of membrane, and welding machines, it was often very heavy. So I was really happy when I was given a real tunnel job. It was pretty quiet about the project. We all had to sign pretty long documents. Before we got on the plane, we went to NDS. That's one reason why I won't tell you exactly where it is. I also don't want anyone to find out what we did, so it's best to leave it alone during the taps. The tunnel was only supposed to be about 3 miles long. But there will always be problems when you take through subsea rock foundations. So, nothing moved faster than a snail. It didn't help that the shifts seemed to have way too few people on them. When I got there around noon, it was already pretty far along. A huge, high-tech drilling rig was about halfway done. When my foreman put us on our shifts, I was put with a couple of experienced workers, a few local teens on temporary contracts, and a new employee named Paul. Paul and I got along well from the start. We were both pretty young, liked a lot of the same music, and had a laid-back attitude about life in general. We worked 12-hour shifts in the middle of the night, 6 days a week. Then we'd have a day off to get ready for the next shift, whether it was day or night. So, if you wanted to stay sane down there, you had to work with people you could get along with. I say down there, which might be confusing. Most of the time, tunnels go right through mountains, right? But we're talking about subsea tunnels here, and you can think of the layout as a valley that goes down from the mainland to a safe depth, then slowly rises back up to the surface on the other side. The lowest point is called the sink. Since all the water that leaks through the foundations will end up there, a huge pumping system will have to work around the clock to pump all the water back out, or else we'll all drown when the tunnel collapses on itself. The lowest point in this tunnel was just under a mile below sea level, and the Nomad passed this point just a day before I started my first shift. Paul and I were both pretty new and didn't have our welding licenses yet. Both of us were given this job. The veterans hated each duty, but I found it relaxing and soothing. I won't bore you with the details, but I can quickly tell you what I did to make sure the waterproof membranes were installed correctly. Someone had to crawl into the ditch behind the tunnel parts and attach the membranes to the structure. It was a dirty, cold, and wet job that took goddamn forever to do. But you could work at your own pace because no one wanted to go back there to check on you. You could also listen to music and, if you didn't mind being alone and in the dark, it was a pretty chill job. However, strange things started happening. Already on the first shift, a couple of the locals were sent back up after a few hours, and no one seemed to know why. One of the guys from another shift had cleaned, and they had been found lying on the ground having some kind of seizure, but he hadn't seen it. Something like that. He's shocked the known has stopped you all of a sudden. The driver would not go any further. We're not supposed to be here, he yelled as they pulled him out of the room. The next day, someone else took over. I just sat in my ditch and put the membrane down slowly while listening to music. I wasn't in a hurry, and the name wasn't moving, so I didn't bother to watch it. Paul was in the ditch on the other side of the tunnel, but every hour or so, we'd meet up for a smoke. We started at the top, so we were slowly moving toward the sink. At this space, it would likely take about a week. But the next day, one of the veterans on the shift was badly hurt. I think his name was, and he got his arm caught in the steel arches that held up the membranes. He screamed for about an hour until someone finally freed him. Still, his arm couldn't be safe. Let's be sad. Still, he was in the hospital. As they rushed him to the ambulance, he kept saying strange things. Teeth, he said, too many teeth. Almost every day, this kept happening, but the foreman didn't seem to care that people were getting hurt in random accidents. What do you mean by crazy things as they were done? No operator, and the afternoon operator is being switched out without a word. At the end of the first week, only Paul, me and a single veteran Norm was working her shift. We were all sitting around a table in a local bar, getting used to working the night shift and talking about all the strange things that had happened. You guys don't get it enormously drunkenly. There must be something there. Shut your mouth? I shouted, a vodka. Your mind is just messing with you. Fuck you is bad. What I saw and what Hank saw are both clear to me. It was strange. I'm leaving tomorrow, so I'm not going back there. Terry, what Paul said, I'm not going to let you do that. You'll lose your job. Don't give a fuck about Norman Bolt. I'll find something else better than ending up like Hank. Something about the way he looked made his eyes look hollow, far away, and scared. I didn't believe him, of course. I couldn't believe his fucking story. Didn't make any sense. There was a face sticking out of the wall. It had no features and a lot of teeth. Norman whispered, there was nothing but teeth. The horribly large human teeth scared the hell out of me. He kept his word. The next day, I left. He didn't care that the foreman yelled at him for half an hour. Just put his stuff right at the foreman's feet and walked out the door. Paul and I just stood there. We were the only ones still working, but we didn't know what to do. So far, we had only been in the ditch, so we didn't know what else was going on. Just off the road. The foreman told us, I'll have a new boss by the end of next week, so we worked our way down to the sink inch by inch. Not all the time, but mostly it just sat there and did nothing. No one really wanted to run it, and no one could. Even the most basic understanding of it usually took weeks to learn, but there was no one around to teach it. By the end of the week, they had all quit, gotten badly hurt, or gone completely crazy, even though I was starting to wonder if the money was worth it. Paul was also acting very strange. I think it started when the loud sound of the sink became the main sound in the room. Even with my headphones on full blast, I couldn't get rid of the eerie, hypnotic sound of the water running and the machine pumping. Paul stopped coming over to smoke with me every hour. I didn't see him for whole shifts, and when I did, he was pale and his eyes seemed to go right through me. His eyes were all over the place, and he would sweat and shiver. I tried to talk to him, but he didn't make much sense and ran back to his room quickly. I knew there was something wrong, but I shook it off. Probably just a book, a cold, or maybe the flu, something from this world that I could understand. Still, people kept getting lost. They could no longer hide it. Almost no one was left in the tunnels at all. The foreman didn't care what anyone said. I told him that if I kept asking questions, he would just tell me he would fire me. He would tell you to keep your questions to yourself and keep your eyes on the ditch. I only had 5 days left of my shift, and then I would have a couple of weeks to rest, relax, and enjoy my big fat paycheck. Money talks, no doubt about it. I would be fine for 5 days. I haven't seen Paul for days. And, as I said, I felt something deep inside that I couldn't ignore while I was in the dark and listening to the sink hum. I don't know if it was exactly fair, but I know it was based on fear. I would describe it as a very scary feeling of danger or a bad feeling about something. There was something wrong. Something wasn't the same. I crawled out of it, and into the main tunnel, but nothing changed. The awful feeling stayed with her. I decided to see how Paul was doing. He might have felt the same way. Maybe he also felt it. I crawled over to the teacher on the other side, but I was soon too confused to do anything else. Paul could not be found. But what was even stranger was that, as far as I could tell, he hadn't been working. For about 100 yards, not a single part of the membrane was held down. What the funk had he been doing down there for the past week, and where the funk was he? I crawled up and down the ditch calling his name, but there was no answer. All I could hear was the sound of the pumps, which was either too loud for me to hear. I knew right away that there was only one place to go. I hadn't looked. One place. We shouldn't have gone? The actual sink. It was on Paul's side of the tunnel. It was a small, crowded hallway that ran from the ditch for about 50 yards before opening up into a large room with a deep pool of water and a huge pumping system. I had only been there once, on my first day, and we weren't allowed to go near it at all. Unchecked, a single problem with the system could bring the whole tunnel down, so it should only be run by trained engineers. We didn't have any trained engineers left, of course. They work on it, too, and I followed them nervously down the hall to the sink while desperately covering my ears. As they stood on the ledge overlooking the pool, I noticed something on the other side by the pumps that I hadn't seen the last time I was there. Something that is very strange and totally out of place. A door. I finally made a white wooden door look like it came from a Gothic mansion. The tour didn't go into the rocky wall or anywhere else. It just stood there like it was in the air. Someone had forgotten. The door was left in the middle of the path. I slowly went around the pool, keeping an eye on this thing the whole time. I just knew it had something to do with what was going on down here, and I knew it had something to do with Paul. It had an oddly curved handle with a misshapen figure carved at the end of it. I carefully grabbed it, and all the way up my arm to my shoulder, I felt a grim, cold feeling. I slowly opened it, thinking that all I would see was the rocky wall behind it. Instead, I took a step back in shock as my mind slowly tried to figure out what I was seeing. I don't know how to explain it. That makes no sense at all, but the door did lead somewhere else. As far as the eye could see, there was a long, narrow hallway. On its smooth walls, I could see ancient ruins, symbols, and carvings that I didn't understand at all. But it was the blood that really caught my attention. The pools of blood all over the ground will keep making people do what I did, step back. I saw something moving away from me and coming toward me at a normal speed. I stepped back, and it kept coming. It was now as clear as day to me. It was moving in a strange way, as if it didn't want to move at all. It was shaking, casting shadows, and spasming its way toward me. I don't know how to describe the thing well enough. I'm not sure it's even possible. It was pale, crooked, and misshapen. It was coming at me on 6 thin tentacles, but its teeth were aimed at my face. Too many of them. Human teeth that are grossly too big. I was scared as I saw it get closer and closer, drooling and making strange noises. I quickly realized I couldn't just run away. I had to put it away. The door had to be shut. I quickly came back to myself and ran towards it. I slammed the door shut just before the creature got to me, but before it closed. I only saw it for a second, but what was hanging around its neck scared me even more than the creature itself. Hard hat, hard head, hard pose, look. I don't know what the hell went on down there, and I don't know who Paul was. Did whatever it was eat Paul? No matter what, the thought of either one gave me chills, so I didn't think twice. Didn't question it. I think the only thing that made any sense was I gave the pumps a new look. I thought that a few well-placed hits with a heavy wrench would do the trick, and it turned out that I was right when alarm sirens and fast flashing lights went off all at once. No time could be wasted. I ran so fast that my legs couldn't even hear me. I made it to the top. Around the same time as the collapse of the tonic behind me. The rising water pushed almost everything away, and in the end, the building just couldn't hold. I put the blame on Paul for everything, and I couldn't help it. Who would believe me if I told them the truth? I don't go into tunnels anymore. Not even the ones that give money. I have no idea what the stink was down there. Blood? I know it wasn't supposed to be here.